On The Kirky B Show, mix and mastering engineer, producer, Elisa Pangsaeng.
Hey, it's Kurt Pescara, the Kirky B Show, and I'm here with Mix Master Supreme Goddess, Mix Master, and like mastering goddess too, right?
Yeah, that's my thing these days. That is my thing.
Elisa Pangsaeng. Am I saying that correctly?
You got it. Totally.
There it is. Elisa, we first met, gosh, I want to say 2010, 2011.
Probably.
I was
Yeah,
playing
around
on a
there.
project for a friend of mine, and you were the engineer. And I just got to say that, like, the first thing I heard on the playback was like, "Oh my God, my drums sound amazing," and I was blown away. And I think maybe we worked on some other project, maybe remotely. I can't remember.
Possibly. Yeah, it all runs together, doesn't it? But yeah, that was a
Yeah,
super fun session at Blue Wave
exactly. Blue
on
Wave. That was a
that old
cool studio in
API.
Vancouver. And
Mm.
and then since then, we haven't really kept in touch. But I've been watching on social media all the cool stuff you've been up to. And what have you been up to lately?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of, like most people, had a somewhat involuntary shift during the pandemic where the whole, working in studios and being in session with strangers every day was a little bit anxiety inducing. And it just so happened that at the same time I have a friend I've known forever, basically since we were kids, who started a mastering studio. I want to say he founded it in like '06 or like ages ago, something like that. And he was just kind of getting tired of doing it by himself and wanted, someone to bounce ideas off of. And so he pitched the idea of me, doing some mastering. He was like, I think you'd be
Mhm.
good at it. Do you want to try it out? And I was like, heck yeah. And he was like such a great mentor, super supportive, got me right into it. And then pandemic hit pretty much right away after I made that choice. So I just dove in with both feet kind of thing.
Cool.
And that's been the
So you're
majority of
primarily
the time.
doing mastering at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I still do some mix projects and a couple production things here or there. But right now we're going for it. And it's been going really
That's
well. It's pretty cool.
that is so cool. And I am trying to champion as much the female point of view in our industry because there's just not enough of you. And being raised by my mom, who was a musician as well, I just during that time, 30, 40, 50 years ago, I saw the hardships she had to go through and how extra hard she had to work in order to stand amongst, her fellow musicians, which are predominantly men. And so as I am continuing on with my career, I'm noticing more and more females and the like coming into the scene and just making a huge impact. And there's one thing I wanted to ask you because I've heard this before.
Yeah.
From my understanding on what I read, that the female ear is much more attuned to music and melody, so therefore mixed masters such as yourself can really define the tones and the frequencies much better than the male ear. Is this true?
I have no idea. I will take that.
Okay,
I mean,
I'm for
yeah,
it.
I don't know. Right? I hadn't heard that per se. And obviously I couldn't speak to the opposite experience, but right on. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And it had something to do with the mother's voice and how
Oh, well,
the mother's voice is more sing-songy and
sure.
more up and down and more melodic, whereas the dad, father, male voice is more linear, and the
Hmm.
mom's voice is okay, it's time to eat. It's dinner
Totally.
time, so it has this comforting
Hmm.
wave of frequency versus this.
Totally. Yeah, well, it's interesting. My sister just had kids,
Ah,
and twins. It's crazy. Uh,
twins. Oh,
yeah, and I just
wonderful.
noticed like exactly what you're saying. I didn't really. She's very musical naturally, but she was never into music, and she didn't sing all that often outside of like a karaoke bar or something. But I've noticed when she communicates with her newborns, she's very sing-songy. And I wonder if that's just an instinct that just comes from the whatever feeling is going on inside and just being able to like literally resonate
Right,
with your
right.
children. Anyway, it's
Yeah,
tangent, but
right. And I just would imagine that that definitely has like it's a strong point, especially in mixing and mastering and being able to hear beyond, um, you know, if you will, air. I remember hanging with the great late great Al Schmidt, and he was mixing air. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, hear that above the voice? I'm like, "I hear nothing." He goes, "Yeah, exactly. That nothing has to have a sound." And when he told me that, I was like, "Oh my God!" All I hear is boom, crash, bang. In my frequency range, and
sure.
what you do is just so much more than that. And thank God, because otherwise, if you had people that didn't know how to mix putting music out there, it would be a mishmash, and we'd all have headaches, and
Possibly. I
Tylenol
mean,
would be like the thing of choice to take care of it. But so moving forward, gosh, okay, so 2010, 2011, unless I worked with you, have you since then been doing I know the mastering thing, but tracking sessions. And because of the pandemic that happened last year, are you finding those less and less tracking sessions?
um, that's kind of a good question. I mean, I definitely noticed uh a shift away from people gathering in studios. And I think that's part of part of it was my own anxiety around, you know, um, gathering indoors, especially a lot of, you know, with circular air and closed spaces and all that. Some of it was my decision, but also I did notice there was a lot less congregating. Like it was less likely that you would get the whole band in or, an artist and their whole team in or whatever.
Right,
To actually do the recording, we would try and keep it pretty pared down and would try and keep the time in the studio as brief as possible. Outside of budgets and all that, it was just I think general anxiety about being indoors. Um, and it was interesting because I that's my favorite part about being a tracking engineer is being in the room with humans. So when that element kind of disappeared, I don't want to say it didn't totally disappear, but when that became less normal during the pandemic, I was a little bit less interested in doing that. So it seems like people are still getting in the studio and doing their thing, especially now that, restrictions are lifted and it's less life-threatening.
right.
Um, but I definitely stepped back from it. So it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to say objectively, but
And that's totally understandable. I mean, this is a whole other
right?
podcast altogether talking about that thing. But yeah, it just really, I felt it just stripped us away from creativity and put us into this like ball of fear, in general. It
Uh,
was like, okay, how am I going to navigate going to my favorite store around the corner, Trader Joe's? How
oh,
will I navigate that? How will I, you know,
mhm.
touch the gas thing, putting gas in my car? It was
That's the
just
biggest one.
weird, just having to think about all that.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
But but in those tracking sessions, you had mentioned that they were done in like clumps, like maybe bass and drums, and then maybe the guitar player and the singer or whatever.
Mhm.
Was that uh, harder for you in the sense that you couldn't track it all as one picture, and it was just more like piecemeal and trying to fit the parts together?
It's definitely a different experience for sure. Yeah, a lot of them, it took a lot more conceptualizing and a lot more sort of messing around. I think the one thing I started doing a lot more of was actually programming and mapping out as much as possible, even if it didn't like, if we wanted to do strings and horns, I'm not an amazing string arranger and I don't have amazing string sounds, but I would mock up something so that we had at least like a part of the whole picture going in to do the other pieces.
Mhm.
So I think something that became more common for me was just to sketch up the whole thing top to bottom, even if it was sometimes just bad, and then slowly replace, what needed to be and augment, the things that were working. And that kind of
Right.
makes, like, I mean, I guess I was always kind of doing that to an extent, but I became a lot more thorough in it because I couldn't really lean on the whole band and the pre-production and all that stuff happening off the floor in the same way.
Right.
Um,
So essentially, you kind of became the extra member of the band to help glue it all together, I would imagine.
Yeah, which was something, I mean, right before the pandemic too, I started getting back to my roots of like producing and songwriting and, wanting to be more involved from the ground up. So it was kind of a natural transition anyway, but it
Right.
it certainly became necessary when you're like planning these pretty large scale productions and then you kind of just have to like execute them and then not only do you just have to execute them like on a shorter timeline than you might be used to, you have to execute them like piece by piece. And yeah, it is way harder to kind of, there's an element of like, hope this sounds as good in my head as it does,
Right.
on
Right.
recording.
Right.
Anyway,
So you just kind of put it forth and then see what happens. And as they say, fix it in the mix later.
well, there was some of that, but the preparing and sort of programming everything ahead of time really, really helped. Like I would do it with drums, I would do it with strings, I would do it with horns, I would do it with like I play guitar terribly, but I would even mock up guitars
Which
if
brings me to my next question.
yeah.
Did you start out before you got into mixing and mastering?
Mhm.
Did you play an instrument or anything like that before you got into this end of the industry?
Play. I was definitely an angsty teenager with an acoustic guitar. I have the world's freakishly small hand. Like they are so small. I really I played piano when I was like a kid, and I played guitar when I was in high school, but like my hands really aren't cut out for it at all. So I've never been good at it. When I was a young adult, I took drums really seriously.
Oh, wow.
And
Cool.
that was probably like the only instrument that I felt like I, for a very brief period of time, had like command over. Command. I'm talking to you. That sounds ridiculous. But, you know. But yeah, all of those experiences really helped just, I don't know, especially if you like grow up doing something or you just have it, instruments around the house. It's all just kind of like it's in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that the best engineers and producers, they've dabbled in many instruments and never really found their groove with it. And they once they sat behind a desk, it was like, okay, this is where I could really shine because from what I've been told, is that they could hear everything and what it should sound like and what it
Mhm.
should be like. So they're able to put all that together. I mean, for me, just to mix bass and drums, I'm like, what's happening here? Why is it distorting? Why is there mud? Why can't I get a clear sound? And
Mhm.
then I just have to pull back and say, call the professionals. Call Elisa. She'll do it.
Bless. I mean, yeah, that's that you described that really well. That's how I felt the first time I sat behind a console. And I've been really lucky to sit behind like a lot of extremely beautiful consoles. So,
So now we got to get into the geek talk. What's your favorite
oh,
desk to
don't,
sit behind?
how could I possibly? It's a
Your
tie.
favorite, if you won the lotto and they said, okay, you could have any desk you want. What's the desk for EP?
I
Go.
would have to do the Harrison 32. I loves me the Thriller console, which is kind of, it feels like I am cheating on my my soulmate here when I say this because I was trained on an API 1604. It was like it was like two consoles. The one that it was at Blue Wave, two consoles that they like cut in half and pieced together in an interesting
Mhm.
way. So it was like pretty custom. And it was impossible to make a bad recording on that console. It sounded so ridiculously good. I hope it's still out there. So it's a bit of a toss up, but I think when I was, when was it? Oh gosh, I don't even know. There was this Harrison 32 at this kind of, underused studio in town. Someone was just like, hey, you should just come hang out here and make records here. And I did. It was a totally different experience. So that thing is a real instrument, like the API can be an instrument, but it can also just sort of be there, and like,
Yeah.
but the 32C I don't know. For whatever reason, I was floored by it. I loved it. And
Yeah. It was the one that spoke
yeah,
to you
mhm,
most clearly.
for
And
sure.
like, so, okay, so microphones, that's a whole other podcast.
Probably.
Mic pre's. But for funsies, let me just ask you if there was a desert island mic and a desert island mic pre, what would that one mic and one mic pre be? If like we're gonna give you one microphone, one mic pre, and you got to make a record, go. What would you use?
So you want to say something cool and vintage, right? But then you're like, but it'll break and I'm on a desert island.
All right, let's say
uh,
there's a tech. There's a
oh,
tech
there's
in
a
the
tech on the
cave.
desert island? Huge. I mean, I still don't actually know. I want to say something cool and vintagey. Like, I mean,
There's no rules or regulations here on the Kirky B show. So
I know.
if it's super something super modern, even if it's a plugin, who cares?
I can't decide. This is my problem right now. I'm like
All
totally
right,
put on the spot. No, the TG2 is probably one of my favorite and most consistent preamps of all time. Obviously, a
all right,
1073 or anything sort of 10, 70, 10, and 80, that wheelhouse. What else do I love? I love those. Now I'm just saying them all. Ha! For modern stuff, the undertone audio preamp that I have, it's insane. It's so killer. Um, okay, I'll leave it at that.
okay,
It seems to be all, I guess there's not a lot of like Desert Island tube preamps in my life, huh? Anyway, um, I'd probably have to bring a vintage 87. Just reliable,
yeah.
predictable, you know?
Well, again, there are no wrong answers here on the Kirky B show, so I'm going to go with you. That sounds fantastic. Um, okay, so most of your, let's say, tracking work that you do and mix,
Mhm.
are you mixing predominantly inside the box
Mhm.
within the DAW, or do you do a mishmash? What's your usual go-to in terms of mixing?
It's pretty much in the box, especially right now. I don't actually, well, you can't really tell because this is just a box, but um, I'm, I haven't had a studio space for a little bit, so I don't have my analog mix rig even set up right now. I was just doing like a D-box. Like I have like an is radar. I pull the cards out of an is radar and put them in their little Dante um half rack thing, which is super cool. And that was feeding my dangerous D-box. And mostly like for analog stuff, I mean, I have some cool DBX, older DBX stuff that I like, and a bunch of guitar pedals and some, like a spring verb and an Elisa's verb and things like that. So pretty basic in terms
Cool.
of outboard. Um, yeah, so when that is set up, I do like to use it, but it always tends to come back to what is the most easily recallable, like what's the most convenient. Because at the end of the day, that stuff all sounds great, but I mean, in the box is just so flexible and so fluid. I could spend, an extra hour mixing and adding some color with plugins, and I don't know if I would ever really miss the analog stuff at the end of the day. I've
Hmm.
become a little bit of a recording nihilist where I'm like, you got an M box and a 57? Are you a good singer? Yeah, we're probably in good shape,
Right,
So,
right. And what is your DAW of choice these days? Because there's so many now, and they all do great jobs. But what is your DAW, your go-to DAW?
I would still have to say it's Pro Tools. Recording, editing, mixing, all of that stuff, Pro Tools hands down.
Yeah,
Writing and performing, Ableton.
yeah,
And then for mastering, I use Wavelab. So it's kind of depends on what hat I'm wearing.
right, right.
But those are my three mains, and
Those are
they
the
don't
main.
really overlap. Like I wouldn't use or be tempted to use one in any other, like they each shine in their own scenario.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Five favorite plugins. The
man.
five that you have to have inside before you
Oh,
even start the downbeat of the song. Go.
oh man. Waves SSL E series. Uh oh.
Are you looking at your computer right now?
No, yes, but there's nothing on it. I'm just like looking at it to
Oh, okay. I was like, does she have
uh
Pro Tools up right now?
I actually do. Whoops.
All right.
Oh man. Okay, track comp. Huge. Pro Q3 probably. Again, I'm gonna start getting real boring. Maybe even just like that um DSP filter bank. I love those things. How many is that? Three, four? What did I say?
Four, I
Four.
think.
Oh, I
But
should probably
hey,
throw a reverb in there. I love my EMT 140, the UA one. Five.
yeah.
That's five.
Okay.
Sure. I don't know.
So do you usually build templates and before you start tracking a band, or do you go a la carte, like, okay, this is a banjo band, or this is like
Mm.
full post punk rock band? Do you
Uh,
set up a template for all styles of music, or do you per band kind of thing?
well, when I'm tracking, I don't. I'm really fast at Pro Tools, so I don't find a template really saves time. You still have to route it, you still have to label it, and so tracking, not so much. Writing, maybe a little bit. Have a drum rack that I like. I have an effects rack that I like if in Ableton, if we're doing that.
Yeah,
And some cool patches on hand, that's helpful.
right on.
And then for mixing, I'll usually build a template per project. So I know what I like on vocals roughly. I know what I'm probably going to use, and then I'll build out like what I call like my studio or my studio racks, and I'll
Right.
just like build certain like if we want to go super vintagey, I'll have a bunch of plates and springs out. Or if we want to go more modern, I'll have some of the like a BX
So any
500 or
outboard
something like that.
gear for effects that you go to, or is it all in box?
I like my little Furman spring reverb RV1. I use that a lot. I have like oh, my brain. What is that? It's the same the delay chip that's in the Moog cluster flux. I have like a delay that just gets really weird and ugly, which I like using a lot. And then guitar pedals, tons of those.
Oh, cool.
Like on most of my drum sounds are just guitar pedals.
Right on.
Or end up being guitar pedals. What else do I like? And yeah, I have a microverb and a MIDI verb, and those are fun. Sometimes I get used, sometimes I don't. Nothing crazy.
So what are you involved with now? Is there anything you want to mention that is happening with you right now that you're involved with?
Um, I mean, I'm really just, well, I say this very loosely. I'm there for moral support. My business partner is building us a brand new mastering studio from the
Wow.
ground up, which is extremely exciting. See, that's where I get all my like my gear nerding out now. Not so much in the recording, but in the mastering. Oh yeah.
And so this
Um,
build out is happening right now. And when do you expect completion?
well, pretty soon,
All right.
because I think it's now just becoming a massive stress on poor Brock. Uh,
Want to give a
so
plug for it for those who will be watching this and eventually will need a mastering place?
yeah, yeah, we're CPS Mastering. And you can find us at cpsmastering.com or on Insta at the same handle. I'm trying to think. I've never actually plugged CPS before. I just usually hide in a hole and do my thing.
Right.
But yeah, those you can reach us there. And
Right on. And
I don't
also,
know.
how could we follow your amazing career as it's going along? How can we follow you on social media?
Uh my Instagram handle is cat pictures, all one word.
Okay.
Um, because I thought that was funny when Instagram first came out. I don't have any cats, but you can definitely find some sick recording photos and lots of mastering work on there.
And in closing, this is an important question that I get asked every now and then, but I thought, God, if I'm going to do some questions, if I ever ask someone questions, I want to ask them this all the time. And that question is, um, there are these teenage girls right now that are listening to music and they're listening beyond the song.
Yeah.
And they're probably wondering, wow, how did they get that guitar sound or that snare sound? Or why do her vocals sound that way? And they're
Mm.
eventually going to run into the wall of sound, if you will, the wall of mixing
Hmm.
and the
Sure.
wall of recording. What would your words of wisdom to these up and coming mix masters? What would you say to them? What would be your line of advice for them?
Oh man, just do it. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of like stigma around, like knowing everything or being able to do everything and don't worry about any of that. If you love it, just go find a way to do that, however that looks for you, and just trust your gut. Make music
Right,
that you like. I feel like that's like, when if you hear something, if you hear a production and you react to it in that way where you're dissecting it immediately, which is something that, I used to be aware of all the time before I started this professionally.
right.
And that's a real thing. That's a real instinct, and that is gonna take you places if you wanted to. So, the other stuff, signal flow, music theory, cool, it's important, whatever, but you'll learn it. It's, end of the day, that's not the hard part. The hard part is being able to hone it in and hear and listen beyond the song, like you put it. And if you're already doing that, then you got something going on. Go
That
chase
is
it.
so awesome. That is incredible. Elisa, thank you so much for your time and your efforts in making the Cricket Bee Show happen with me. And it was just great having you on. And I hope everyone watches this and has the insight to your amazing ears and
Appreciate that.
moving forward with all your cool projects that you're involved with. And again, check out her mastering lab that's going to be coming out soon. That'll be done. The last nail
Yeah,
into
right.
the two by four.
Yeah. Thank you, Brock. CPS
And again,
Mastering.
thank you so much. And thanks for being on the Cricket Bee Show. We
Thank you for
out.
having me.
Thank you.